Hello and welcome, wonderful panelists and viewers watching us live on YouTube. I'm so excited to moderate a fantastic panel today on From There to Here Writing Across Geographies today, in which seven phenomenal writers have joined us from around the planet. We have Ayatollah Teigbola joining us from Lagos, Nigeria, Ben Jeffries from Wellington, New Zealand, Christine Etchen from Boston, the US. Linda Collins also joining us from New Zealand. Melissa L. Brownlee comes to us from Japan. Moises Delgado from Nebraska, the US. And Vana Manasyade is also joining us from New Zealand. Welcome to the Festival of Flash, and for the next 1 hour, we'll focus on writing across geographies. So tune in and listen to us. I'll start with Melissa, if you can unmute yourself, please. Yeah. Uh, Melissa, who is a native Hawaiian writer living in Japan, she has work forthcoming in Cutliff Journal and Prairie Schooner. Her books include Hard Skin and Kahi and Lua, both published in 2022, and Bitter Over Sweet, forthcoming in November 2025 from Santa Fe Writers Project. She tweets Lum Chan MFA and talks story at melissablanesbrownlee.com. If you read Melissa's stories, and there are many, many of them, you'll be immersed in Hawaiian cultural references, the language, the setting, the people, their dialogues. Everything is so authentic and so genuinely felt that the narrative comes alive like a living, breathing existence. So, Melissa, you're based in Japan, a country I personally hugely adore. If I were to live anywhere other than my home country, it would be Japan. So I remember watching one of my earliest memories is watching a 60s movie with my parents, and where the leading lady lands in Japan and sings Sayonara, Sayonara. So even today, when I watch travel videos, a lot of my stories are based in Japan. But of course, your excellent stories are deeply rooted in Hawaiian culture and authentic geographic markers. So again, Hawaii is also a very well-known place with a distinctiveness that is universally acknowledged. So tell us more about this choice between Japan and Hawaii and how it percolates into your writing. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Mandira. I really appreciate it. So I think let's talk about the reason why I write about Hawaii and not necessarily Japan. For me, I think when I write something, I'm tapping into more deeper emotional content. So I don't really have like as strong an emotional tie to Japan as I do to Hawaii because I always feel like when I write, I'm tapping into my childhood, and children just have such a deep well of emotions that we until we become adults, we are just swimming in these things, these atmospheres, the just everything is just bombarding us, and we just take them in like little sponges. And I really do believe like all of my emotional content, all of my sensory details, they all come from experiencing them as a child. So a lot of my writing, whenever I need a certain feeling, I usually tap those experiences and emotions because I just feel like they're so much closer to, the truth. Whereas as we get older, our brain hardens and we don't remember the things so well, that happened most recently. It's not that I don't write about Japan, I do, but I tend to find that my writing when I write about Japan tends to deal more with my outsiderness out here. I mean, I was an outsider in Hawaii too. Even though I'm Hawaiian, I was still kind of different. So I never really fit in really well. And I also was adopted. So that kind of added an extra layer of uncomfortableness in my childhood. But neither that or that's not here there. But yes, when I write about Japan, I'm tapping into something a little more, I don't know, more cerebral versus like emotional. I mean, there is emotion because being an outsider continuously can weigh you down a lot. So I don't really want to dwell on that since I have to work in I work in that and experience it every day. When I get home, I like the last thing I want to do is think about the little microaggressions that I have to deal with constantly as a foreigner in this culture. And don't get me wrong, I love Japan. I've been here for 17 years. It's a beautiful country, and there are many, many beautiful things that I love about this country and this culture and the food. But again, I'm not married to a Japanese person, so I'm not embedded in the culture as I would be if I were. I'm married to another American because we both grew up in Hawaii. But yeah, so as far as like what I choose for topics in geography, but I also feel like living outside of America also gives me a different lens because I can look at what's happening in America and like write to it because I'm not living in the experience. And I think it might be easier for other people not living in Japan to write about living in Japan because I think sometimes when you live in the middle of something, it's hard for you to get a perspective of it. I guess, yeah. I think I talked for more than 3 minutes, maybe. Do you have any questions, Mandira?
No, it's perfect. I understand this because I've also grown up in a lot of places, and for me also, I feel like an outsider everywhere. I don't feel
Yeah,
like belonging to any particular place.
yeah.
So that's very relatable. Thank you so much.
No problem. My pleasure.
Uh, let's now move to Vana. Vana is one of the judges of the 2025 NFFD competition in Ayutthaya, New Zealand, and her work appears most recently in the dual language anthology with stories in English and Te Reo Maori, Poto Short, from July. She will be in Crete to work on her next book, another experiment in hybridity and autofiction, and to welcome the Greek translation of the Grief Almanac in a very small bookshop. Vana is a poet, editor, and translator, and the author of four books, including Island Bay Leaves, A Myth, Historia Ma, and The Grief Almanac, a sequel. She has been a Michael King and Ursula Bethel writer in residence and is now senior lecturer in creative writing at Te Wanaga o Waitak, Canterbury University. Welcome, Yana. I hope you can unmute yourself.
Kia ora, Mandira. Kia
Yeah.
ora.
Hi.
No
Hi.
kāriki au ko te whanganui tara te whenua tapu kei ototahi e noho ana γεννήθηκα στην Νεζηλανδία αλλά έχω ζήσει πολλά χρόνια στην Ελλάδα. So I've just introduced myself using a Māori mihi, and I always add a line or two in my other important language, which is Greek. I've lived for a long time, half my life, probably more than half my life really, in Greece, although I was born here in Aotearoa, and I'm back living in Aotearoa in Christchurch, but from Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, which is where I'm right now. So I feel shared amongst many geographical spaces, and I feel them functioning very simultaneously in my writing, and I, I I very much appreciate the notion and feel familiar with the notion of the outsider that has been mentioned already today. And I'm first generation here, so when my mother immigrated here from Greece, I experienced through her, even though I very much pass for a Pākehā white New Zealander, a lot of racism that she experienced and a lot of difficulty when she moved here in the 1960s. And before that, my family were refugees from the Greek diaspora in Asia Minor. So we have had kind of intergenerationally a lot of loss and a lot of pain. So my writing is often navigates very painful territory. I guess I'm not a very fun writer. I and I think there is some sense of wanting to work through a lot of intergenerational loss and pain and grief. But I've also come to very much, I feel like, inhabit something like the notion of the third culture, the notion of not being in one or another or a third or a fourth, or really circling back, being in a sort of a liminal third space, which is neither one or other. And that being kind of my whare, my home. So I feel that there's been some sense over my lifetime, really, um, of of coming to a place of calm after a lot of tension around belonging and voice and language and expression and franchise. Uh, as and I'll close just by saying that this has expressed itself in more recently an endeavor to write in both Greek and English simultaneously in the same texts. So I have come from a place of love for translation to love for this notion of the translingual or the trans language, which is where you honor your multiple languages without having to translate them for a majority culture, which globally is mostly an English speaking majority culture. And so that is what I'm kind of doing in my next project, very much working in multiple languages and trying to honor them while still hopefully writing something that is legible and meaningful in some capacity to readers. That's me. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you so much. We all understand, I think, how this liminal space works, like some in between geographies, in between languages, and that is what enriches the language and enriches the work we put out there. So next, joining us from Lagos today is Ayatollah Tayingbola. Welcome, Ayatollah. She's a lawyer, photographer, writer, and translator. Her writing has appeared in The Common, Craft, and Witness magazine, among others. She was a finalist for the 2023 Grey Wolf Press African Fiction Prize for debut novel and the 2024 Restless Books Prize for new immigrant writing. My question to Ayatollah would be, would you like to tell our audience today something about your process? Like, how do you choose your specific geography references and why? And if you could please also add that why do you think your stories appeal to an international masthead and a global readership when many people may not be familiar with your region?
Thank you for that question, Mandira, and thank you for the introduction. The first question, it's very interesting, the word geography. And because I also teach creative writing, I would use craft as an entry point for this question. So instead of saying maybe geography, I'm going to make it a bit smaller and think about place. One of my favorite craft essays ever is the essay Place by Dorothy Allison. And she talks about place being a feeling. I actually never start my work from place. I start my work from character motivation. Why, who is this character? Why this character? What do they want? What do they really need? What are their flaws? And when I get an inner peek into their lives, then I can see the places that are important to them. It's very interesting because my writing place shines through very well, I would like to think, but only because you are seeing it through the eyes of my characters. I feel like sometimes geography can just be a placeholder, like a descriptive placeholder. Oh, now we are in Lagos and the sun is hot and it's raining and there's traffic. And it doesn't mean anything in the story because it's just describing. So for me, geography is place. If I can bring it home, and place is only important because my character is inhabiting that space. My character has a connection or does not have a connection to that space. The other question about reaching a wider global audience, to be honest, I don't care much on purpose. I attended an MFA in the US and I realized from my first workshop that if I started translating my stories and translating quote unquote because I write in English, like we're colonized by the British. It's my first language. But I realized if I started translating, I would always translate. And I realized I was doing twice the work that other writers were not doing. And I wasn't interested in that. It was kind of, and I think it sounds privileged to say that, but like it was intentional. I grew up reading British and American books. Nobody translated anything for me. I would read books about the antebellum South. I didn't know where that was. I didn't know the history, but I became a global citizen by reading these books. And I invite the reader to do the same work that I had to do to be a global citizen. As long clarity is my goal, sentence by sentence, as long as the work is clear, my sentences, my prose is sharp, my characters are well defined, the place is alive and carries emotion. I think that that is enough for the reader. Yeah.
Of course, that is enough. Completely agree, because we are also colonized people, and people ask me that why do you write in English? Any other languages you write in? I do speak and write in other languages, but they are not for publication. So I only write in English. That sounds very strange for some people, but that's how it is. We have been reading English, and that's how we relate to the global audience. And I love that you say you don't care. Really, we shouldn't be caring who's reading. Okay, let us now hear from Ben Jeffries. Ben's work has appeared in the New York Times, the New Zealand Listener, Solar Journal, and others. He has an MFA from Columbia University in New York. In 2024, he won the Fran Sargeson Prize. Ben, how do you incorporate geographies in your writing?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me, I suppose, first of all. And I don't know who curates these panels, but I was pleasantly surprised in the one I've been placed, because yeah, geography is something I think about a lot in my writing. And similarly to Ayatollah, I call it, I sort of consider it more place. And sort of people's ties to place is something I'm very interested in. And then I think there's a American anthropologist called Keith Barso. He wrote a book called Wisdom Sits in Place, and it really resonated with me. It was sort of this idea that place can be a holder for like collective memory and wisdom. He worked a lot with tribes in Arizona, and they, particularly the place names, that was a way of sort of this collective memory living, and as he called it, wisdom, which is similar to place names in New Zealand in a lot of ways, actually. But anyway, so yeah, that's something I've been fascinated with for a very long time. In terms of working place into my work, I write about two places quite most frequently, which is my home, New Zealand, and Kenya, where I've spent a lot of my life. My partner's from there as well. And I have actually lived in other places. I lived in New York for 3 years and almost never wrote about it, funnily enough. As Melissa said, so, you know, like there is an element of, I guess, like love for a place, and that being important in your writing. So for some reason, those two locations, geographies, place, whatever you want to call them, have resonated with me so much that they dominate my work, feature strongly in my work. And there's actually a lot of, I mean, you wouldn't immediately expect it, but there is a lot of sort of this like shared history between the two places, and shared ideas. And so that often features prevalently in my writing, particularly how a history's echo can affect modern relationships, and this idea that place can reflect that, I think is really interesting. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, I'll just finish by saying, in terms of actually weaving it into my work, I'm very much a believer that like it's in these minor details where place can shine, and you get a true sense of it, of these details that can only exist in that place, and that's often within the people. And yeah, it's not, as you say, it's hot, it's raining, you know, it's one-off special details that make it shine. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Place lives in people. That's very nicely put. I appreciate your, and because of your experience in Kenya, I think you also put something about it in your writings.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I mean, I've always my writing that is set in Kenya is from the perspective of, I suppose, the outsider as well. Because I think that's just the way I view it. But yeah, it's I have a very deep love for that place. We have a little shamba there, a little farm there where we visit. We go back all the time, and we it's some of our best friends, and we have a lot of family still there, so we're back quite frequently. And yeah, it's
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
wish we
get
could
it.
spend more time there, but
Okay. So this outsider theme is in most of us, I think, here. Staying on in New Zealand, we have Linda Collins, who is the author of a memoir, Loss Adjustment, published in Aotearoa, Singapore, and China. She was a 2023 NFFD shortlister and has an MA in poetry from the University of East Anglia in the UK, where she shortlisted for the Britport Prize. Her microfiction appears in the new dual language anthology Photoshot, edited by Michelle Elvey and Kiripiana Wong, and released June 2025 by Massey University Press. Linda's author website is lindacollinswriter.com. Linda, I wanted to ask you, you are the author of a memoir, Loss Adjustment. And loss adjustment, I found out, has been described as meditative, heavy, heartbreaking, but equally full of tenderness and undeniable love. Would you agree that geographies are not only physical, they are personal and often constructed out of your experiences, relationships, and emotions?
Thanks, Mandira. That's an intriguing question, and hi to everyone. So to ground you, first of all, in answering that question, I lived in Singapore for about 25 years or more, and my memoir, Loss Adjustment, is about the death of my daughter there, who was a writer in her own right. I've also spent time in the UK when I was young, when I was 20s, and I recently went back there to do that MA. So the thing with loss adjustment, I wrote it doing, I think some people here have done the IIML course in Wellington. So this was my project for the MA, and I got 2 MAs in Wellington. And I was still, just took a year away from Singapore, and I was still working for a Singapore newspaper while I was writing this memoir in Wellington. So I already was in two worlds. Leave the workshop, go log in. I specialized in Singapore domestic politics. So I found writing my book very difficult in Wellington because I knew that I was writing for a Singapore audience, an Asian audience primarily. And so the New Zealand audience, the New Zealand readership in the workshop wanted different things. I'm kind of interested in writing away from Western-centric constructions, mimetic storytelling, and more, maybe oral traditions. And in loss adjustment, I don't mind if people don't read the whole thing. I see it as something that reaches out to them, something that is a story they might want to hear, but also that I'm passing on some wisdom to them. So it's got a lot of standalone chapters where people can just go in and read what they suddenly feel they need. And in fact, people tell me they buy my book, but they can't bring themselves to read it. And that's okay too, um, because because it opened up a conversation that needed to be opened up in Singapore, which sounds sort of authoritarian of me, but enabled the creation of support groups of parents, and we were then able to form an advocacy group, and we got committing suicide taken off the statute books as a crime. So there was a lot of repercussions, and then a Chinese publisher bought the rights, and for some reason it resonates with mainland Chinese. So there's that. But quickly moving on to the bigger picture, what I'm also writing about in my poetry and my essays, and to a certain extent in my microfictions, is forced displacement. So with the UK, my study visa ran out and I really wanted to stay. but I couldn't because I'm a New Zealander, horribly 5 generations back. And I'm actually not very comfortable in New Zealand. I was most happy in Singapore. And I was forced out of there because the government changed the rules on sole proprietorships. And I just couldn't stay. I had to leave my home. And I still go back there every day in my head and communicating with my friends. So that seeps into my work as well. Internal and physical displacement that I'm I'm sort of processing from a base in New Zealand. Uh, Thanks very much for your questions, Mandira.
Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing your process. And like displacement is a huge issue for a lot of people in the world today. And a lot of my stories do. And I'm glad you write about emotions and construct them as. Thank you. From New Zealand, we move across the world to Nebraska, from where Moises Delgado is joining us. He's a Latino writer, holds an MFA from the University of Arizona, and is a prose editor for the Adroit Journal. His words appear in Fugu, Smoke Long Quarterly, Craft, Split Lip, and elsewhere. In fact, Moises, I was reading your Smoke Long Quarterly story, which has an intriguing juxtaposition of religion and spiritual beliefs. I love the opening sequence. Jesus was brown. Jesus could eat 15 tortillas when hungry and 10 when not as hungry. Would you like to share more about how you style specific references that may be unique to your experiences of place and of people into stories that are sure to cut across boundaries and resonate with other readers? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, I think a lot of my writing has to do with more of like the emotion of being in this place. Omaha is not the only city, but it is and has been, I think, one of the most segregated cities in the whole United States. So I think I've grown up with that feeling, and that's why I kind of like try to work in myself, and that's why Jesus, I was like, what if Jesus is Mexican this time? I thought that'd be funny. So basically, the way I grew up is South Omaha is mainly like the Latino population, which younger me thought it was pretty big because my schools were like 90% Latino. So I was like, I'm where I belong. Everybody I look at looks like me. And not until college did I realize that that wasn't actually the case. West Omaha, it's mostly white, all the money. And then North Omaha, it's mostly the Black community, equally as impoverished as the South. Um, so a lot of my work ends up being influenced by that feeling of at the same time belonging and at the same time not belonging. Because again, when I look around me, it's like, you're my people. I look just a few streets further, you're not my people. And especially right now, right, everything going on in America, you probably don't see me as your people either. So, um, and then once I did my master's in Arizona for 2, 3 years, and then I felt even stranger because this is my home nonetheless. And unfortunately, this the Midwest, the middle of the United States, is considered flyover country. So then people are like, you need to get out, right? People are more interested by the coasts, Los Angeles, New York, Florida, whatever. They're more beautiful. So really the ultimate goal is often like, you should leave a smaller city like Omaha. And so then that becomes a conflict of like, but then what if I actually like Omaha? Despite all the things, this is and has been my home uh, since always. Um, so lately, a lot of my writing, and back to that story with Jesus being Mexican, has been trying to play with humor as a way to try and be like, instead of writing of like, I feel lonely in this place, blah, 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 I'm gonna be like, I want to make myself laugh, first of all, and then hopefully other people laugh to showcase that like, this is my home. I think it's funny sometimes, and I want you to see that there is also joy here, and there's reasons to be here. And it's a real place because I've been told by people that, they just think it's cows and corn. I live in the city. So, yeah, I think that's where I try to bring in again, just myself and those multiple selves. Like I said, there's a lot of layers here that I didn't realize until I got older and realized that, again, I belong and at the same time I don't. But I want to belong here. It is my home, despite everything. And I'm gonna laugh about it. Yeah, I don't know. But thank you for the question.
Thank you. We understand this dilemma between belonging and unbelonging. Like, it's both ways. It can be together too, as you said. Thank you. Finally, also joining us from the US is Christine Chen, who was born in Hong Kong and grew up in Madagascar before settling in Boston, where she worked as a research chemist. Her fiction has appeared in several journals such as The Pinch, Smokelong Quarterly, Time and Space magazine, and included in Weekly Top 50 Very Short Fictions 2023. Best Microfiction 2024-2025 and Best Small Fictions 2024-2025 anthologies. She is a recipient of the 2022 Mass Cultural Council Artist Fellowship. Her stories can be found at www.christinehn.com. Again, reading Christian's work, and I have read of quite a few of them. One is fully immersed in a world filled with cultural references of food, homes, and people. I interviewed Christine once, some time back, and she said almost every story, with the exception of ekphrastic writing, is inspired by a phrase someone said, a feeling, or a moment I've experienced. And I built the story from that kernel of truth, a little like snapping Lego pieces together around it. I really like this idea of making a balance of autobiographical elements and an imaginary setting. So I thought I'll ask Christian, and our audience here, many of whom are writers, would like to know, how do you make culture, place, and geographies an indispensable part of your narratives?
Well, thank you, Mandira. Thank you for having me. How do I make, I mean, as you mentioned already in your introduction, I lived across continents and different countries. And I'm a child of the Chinese diaspora. And as such, as a lot of you other have mentioned, the geographical map in our internal geographical map is also about emotional map, is also about the cultural map. So growing up, my parents fled China, and then they moved to Madagascar, and then I came to the US because they thought that it was best for my future. So taking all of those things into account, my writing just, I mean, they inform my writing, and this is what I write about. And in a way, I could even think that I'm writing my parents' story. This is my mother's voice, my father's voice, who never had a voice. Um, so that's how I feel like my writing represent. And mainly, most of the themes that appear over and over again are the clash between cultures, the culture we're born into as a second generation, and how we handle it, how we navigate between this space that many of you talked about, this whether to belong or not belonging, and what is my identity, where do I belong? So did I answer your question?
Yeah, of course. But would you like to elaborate a bit on how do you exactly, what is your process regarding, like, you have an experience and how do you add geographic elements to it?
Well, actually, the setting, as Ayatollah said, it's more like it's the holder of the character. So I actually don't necessarily think about the setting first. I always think about the emotion or the kernel of truth. I don't know. Take the story for the Lego story, where these fictional characters is a family that the fictional characters are children that tries to live to help their parents dream because they know they live in this very cramped space, and they want to imagine what it would be like for the parents to have a big mansion. So they use Lego pieces to materialize their dreams. And how the story came about is this idea that my mother used to tell me all the time, oh, when you grow up, you're gonna make more money, you're gonna and my parents worked their ass off to be able to send me to the United States to study. So so this voice is in the background, and I when I think of houses mentioned, I think of my what my mother used to say, and that's how this story came about. I think that answers your question better.
Yeah, thank you. I realize this dream, and there's an imaginary setting that is put on, and it's quite relatable for us as well, because we imagine most places and write as writers. Most of our experience are drawn from there only, for imagination and reality juxtaposed together. Wow, that was great as an introduction, everyone. Thank you. And now
Thank you.
moving on to our next segment, I'll share an experience of teaching and generally interacting with other writers. I felt that writers are sometimes afraid to write about places that they have no first-hand knowledge of, like they haven't been there, or they don't plan to visit. We have this advice also coming that write what you know. I think that's a major discussion point, as some writers do break the rules and often would rather write about places they have never been to, relying entirely on imagination, reading, maybe watching videos, and so on. So, I'd like to know from you all, do you avoid writing about regions you're not part of, like you have never been to? Or do you actually enjoy writing about unknown places and think it is very important? Do you think it is in a manner strange, because some people think that way, that it is improper to appropriate cultures you have no first-hand knowledge of? Or do you believe that writing from lived experiences of belonging to a particular region or territory is too restrictive and one should let the imagination like go wild and write whatever you like? I'll start with Melissa again. What is your view on this?
Uh, so oh gosh, this is a hard question. I personally do not write outside of my own knowledge base. I mean, I'm not saying I can't write speculatively about other places, but my work is so chthonic that it's literally based like Hawaii. My work in Hawaii is the place is a character as much as any of the people in my stories are. So if I were to step outside of that and maybe explore other cultures, I would have to feel a connection in some way. I'm not saying that storytelling isn't universal and that you can't step outside of your own purview, but I am also very cognizant of cultural appropriation, even within my own culture, because I don't speak Hawaiian. So even I don't even call myself Kanaka Maoli because I don't speak Olelo. So because I was too old to be immersed in Hawaiian language school. So even though I went to a school for Hawaiians, I went to a high school for Hawaiians, I still don't speak Hawaiian. So I don't call myself Kanaka. I say Native Hawaiian because that's where I feel, even within my own categories of boxes, to say I'm Kanaka would feel like I'm appropriating something I haven't earned. Even though I'm Hawaiian, I am Hawaiian. I mean, but the thing is, like, there are categories within things. Like, I don't like categories, but people I grew up categories are like part of Hawaii. Like, you talk about who you are. Like, I'm Hawaiian, I'm Chinese, I'm German. Like, these are markers within Hawaii when you can say like, oh, I'm related to that person, I'm related to that person. So you make groups based on these categories. I've been trying to get away from that as I get older because I find they're so limiting. So my thing is like, I personally wouldn't want to write about someone else's lived experience. I have tried to do like witness work where I would read like news stories about things happening around the world and try to write to that, but I feel like I'm not appropriating a culture. I'm more feeling an emotion and writing toward that. So I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily using languages I don't know or I'm not familiar with. Some people do, but that's personally not my own purview. I think it's okay, but I also feel like there's a really, really thin line of cultural appropriation. And some people cross it and don't do well. And some people cross it and do okay. But it's all, I think, a matter of who the reader is. The reader ultimately, right, once your work leaves you, you have no control of how someone perceives it, right? You're that's the thing, right? Once it's gone, it's gone. Whatever happens, it happens. Someone's going to like your work or not like your work, identify with it or not identify with it. Once that happens, yeah, so you could be you could be ostracized because you chose to do this one thing and you crossed the line for someone. So I don't know. But personally, yes, for me, I don't do it only because I'm not comfortable with it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Like, I get this that you don't personally do it, but it's okay. Some people do it okay. Vana, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I agree. I think my writing into space and place and persons and languages comes very much from lived experience and my own experiences, either, having spent so long in Greece and learning very much as a diaspora second generation returning to the country of my ancestors, essentially, learning very much and talking about that learning, talking about that discomfort and then returning to Aotearoa, I've spent time on marae. I have relatives. I very much immerse myself in te reo Māori whenever I can, and so I feel like, although having said all that, I'm very conscious of appropriation also, and it's something I think about a lot actually, and I guess I think about, I like the idea that's come through of, I think, Christine, you spoke about the voices, I think of myself also channeling my mother's voice um, and, and kind of other ancestral voices who have perhaps lived in other geographies, speaking often in other languages, and um, and I'm not sure if this is a bit of a bit of creative accounting, but I feel like I'm able to. I feel like honoring those voices and those spaces and those languages is something I feel more comfortable doing than navigating a completely imagined space with completely, perhaps I'm just not very creative actually, but I just feel uncomfortable as well moving into a space where I am wearing a fiction hat and feeling like I can authoritatively um, comment and I'm going to say perform, but I don't mean it entirely pejoratively, but I mean it a little bit pejoratively. um, yeah, I've been meandering a lot, but I guess because I also function very much in the autofiction space, and the autobiographical space, biographical space, then that is why I'm hesitant to move entirely into a very fictional space where I may feel ill-equipped.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I think people who write more memoirs and it's difficult to get into an imagined space where everything is imagined. Like, but I believe like those who are writing in speculative genre, it's more easier to write about something they have never experienced a place or like that. Ayatollah, do you write speculative?
Um, yes, sometimes I do. But even when I'm writing hard realism, I do not have the same anxieties, to be honest. I think the anxieties about appropriation are a very Western sensibility, and maybe it's also my positionality. I sound like an academic, but my positionality as a racialized, gendered, colonized body moving through a Western creative writing space, I'm not as concerned about appropriation because I then begin to ask, what does that mean? Um, and the idea of writing what you know, as somebody who recently wrote a paper on the history of creative writing in America, write what you know, the two principles, write what you know, and show, don't tell. They came from new humanism principles. Like they're not truths. They're not like fundamental truths. I feel like sometimes because of this, because of how these principles have shaped creative writing workshops, we forget that they are not rules, like they're not intuitive. Yes, we have been taught in those traditions, but I don't write what I know. If I know what I'm writing, then that's boring. Research is the most interesting part. Like there are no characters like me in my collection of short stories, for instance. So I don't write what I know. Um, but also, I think that there is a carefulness that writing what you do not know needs to be handled with. What is your positionality? I can imagine that the Western anxiety about appropriation is because appropriation has happened in the past, or who Ben, who, for instance, loves Kenya, who writes as an outsider, is the character an outsider, for instance. I think that there is a carefulness that has to be, um, there's a certain care that has to be taken in writing. I'm thinking of so many books, like many Americans that have written about Nazi Germany, like Tony Doerr, one of my favorite books, All the Light You Cannot See. Like I don't think that I would enjoy writing if I was writing what I knew. I also think that there is a care that has to be taken when doing that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Perfectly. I get this, that whatever you are writing, it's up to you what you decide to write, what setting, what characters. Ben, she mentioned you. Anything you would like to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I similarly really enjoy the research side of writing. I love it. And same
And
thing.
and that thing about if you are writing about Kenya, you're writing as an outsider, so that's okay. That's not appropriation.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't claim to be capturing the Kenyan worldview. It's my writing is about quite often outside characters, just moving through Kenyan spaces. But yeah, for me, I love research. So in one sense, I'm like, yeah, I'd be very much open to writing about a place I've never been, but I never have done it. And I don't think it would be my best writing if I did do it. So I don't have a massive interest in doing that. But yeah, I mean, I think this question has been really like one that has just seemed to define a generation of writers. And it was so prevalent when I was studying. I could see everyone just kind of got fatigued from it. And I've taught creative writing as well. And a lot of my students were so afraid of overstepping. And for me, some of the most interesting things in, a universal experience, particularly in, a world that's becoming more and more diverse and mixed, is these interactions between cultures. And I think that's just a reality of the world. And I had students that were afraid to write characters outside their own experience. I was like, well, if you want to reflect the world, you have to, I think, include this incredible diverse world that we live in. And for writers to be afraid to do that, to me, was sad. Again, I think, just to reiterate what Ayatollah was saying, yeah, I think it just has to be done from a place of respect and care. I think if that's the case, then it's okay. I also think speculatively, it's a great exercise when learning to write, and just to hone certain craft skills, is to write completely beyond what you know. I think that's a great exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To write it with care and empathy. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people have been asking me this, and it also makes me think that what should be the right approach. Everyone is doing their what they think is right. Vana, you, sorry, not Vana, I'm sorry. Linda, want to come in with
Oh,
join us
hi.
from,
Yeah, thanks. It's
yeah.
something quite dear to my heart. I'm conflicted. Melissa, I thought, made some fantastic points there, as you all did. So, yeah, I used to resist writing outside my own experience. So, the geography I negotiate in this, and I don't want to be too open, is that I'm neurodivergent. And if I want my fiction to have dynamism, be interesting, have conflict, I've got to enter into the heads of a neurotypical person. And that involves conflict, whereas I'm someone who kind of doesn't have much agency in my normal life. And to dive into someone who's acting in a very different way, I just find this incredibly difficult. So that's one point. But my fiction, I must do this in order to write fiction you want to read. I'm work in progress there. The other thing is I did a long poem called A Little Bird I Catch to Eat that did well in the UK. And it a Filipina friend in Singapore came to me. She was a domestic worker, what they call a maid. She was my friend. And she was had a stage 4 cancer and she wanted me to tell her story. So I did this in poetic form, but how to do it without crossing boundaries, misappropriating her, getting things wrong, respecting her, but also getting into her dialect and her way of speaking. So I found a way. So I put myself in as an interviewer asking her questions, a character in a poem. And I used a form, the caesura form of pausing to create its own internal rhythm. So her speech patterns became poetry, resisting iambic pentameter. And also I could use the caesura to create tension and then spin it off again. So the poem assumed the form of sculpture. And that worked, but of course, reading it aloud, how do you read aloud a poem told in uh, an accent from Negros Occidental? But luckily,
Yeah. Yeah,
luckily,
I think we get this that using a structure and a method out of this is always available. How to do this.
yes,
Moses, you
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Moses, what is your view on this?
Yeah, I personally don't, at least not right now. My current interests are to just write about my own communities. And again, given the current climate, I think it's kind of important to put Latinx voices out there in the world. Um, but when I was in the school setting and like workshopping peers and stuff, I think for me, what often mattered was it's doable, yes, but the why really matters. Why are you doing this? What is the end goal? So I remember, and I won't go into too many specifics, but there's a classmate, the protagonist was in a wheelchair, and this person is able-bodied, and they were asked, well, why, why is your protagonist in a wheelchair? What work are you doing to be able to write of that? And all they said was, I was so afraid once I felt paralyzed. Ooh, you know, that's like that's like you clearly have not done the work. And so this is where like, especially if you're really getting deep into like cultural things of other communities you don't belong into, that's what I would advise even when I was teaching my students. You really got to think about the why. You can do it, think about the why, put in the work to be able to respect outside communities who don't always have as much privilege as you do. Um, yeah. So that's the big one for me. I'll just have to like the why. I think we have to kind of begin there. Why am I doing that? And it's fine, right? People write wonderful work, but why matters.
Thank you. There are views, everyone has views. And Ben mentioned that if you do it with empathy and care, or as Linda mentioned, devising a structure for the narrative that works for this kind of stories. But again, that's fiction. And there's a thin line. Now, Christine, final comments from you?
I was thinking of more write what you know or write what you don't know. And I feel like every writer has at some point written what they don't know and done some research, right? I mean, it's like I see it more as a broad sense rather than just other than a more ethical ways of looking at of writing something that appropriates. And so for me personally, I think that, for example, I write stories in some setting that take place in Madagascar. However, I haven't been to every place in Madagascar. And to go back to attracting the global audience and whatnot, what if I ask people, what do you know about Madagascar? I mean, I'm sure some people would say, oh, is another place where they have baobab tree. I know for sure I would mention a baobab tree in my story, but I've never seen one in real, like physically in real life. And so, but I have to search, do some research. Okay, in this region, do they have baobab tree? So we all do a little bit of this kind of research. So I feel like every one of us has written something that we don't know. And I personally also love writing speculative. So it's great. It's like it's freeing the inspiration when you write and you make up a whole world out there.
Yeah, I also don't write much speculative, but when I write, the feeling is really like liberating. I can write anything. I
Right.
can imagine anything, and that's kind of freeing. But I rather navigate towards realism, and then it's not that accurate. I have to be somewhere accurate. I can't make the world upside down and so on. So that's a limitation. Uh, I think we have a couple of minutes. If any of you want to particularly recommend some books or one of your stories, then please unmute yourself and let us know that are particularly people should read, that how to use geographies, either their own or imaginary, in their writing.
I think I mentioned this earlier. I teach with it. I swear by it. Everybody should read it, paste it on their walls. The title of the essay is Place by Dorothy Allison. It was published, I think she taught it at a Teen House workshop, and then it was published in the collection. It's a short article. It's amazing. I think it's very helpful thinking about place. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just second that, Ayatollah. I love that as well. It's like great work. That's me done then.
Thank you. That's amazing. I will all look forward to it. And anything else? Anything else that really you think that that is what represents what writing about geography should be? Short fiction or books? Because as Ben said, we are a generation confused or conflicted because we are traveling so much and there's so much of displacement and migration that we are confused. We are somewhere in between. So people have this question that what should we write about? Anything that you think that has done the job really well and people should read and get inspired from? I I've been doing this personally. I've been doing this. I'm writing about other people. I'm not so much conscious about appropriating because I'm not using their dialect or language, just the places, and that I can research all the time. So research does play a big part, I think.
Yeah, if I could just jump in and recommend A Flat Place by Noreen Masood. So Noreen is Pakistan born but lives in the UK. So it's a book that navigates place in terms of one's personal place and internal issues and the geographic space of the flat lands and fens of the UK and relates that to her childhood. I think she's a scholar as well, one of the BBC's people to watch, and so that book has a lot to offer, I feel.
Thank you, Linda. I've
Yeah,
noted this. I've just noted this, and I look forward to reading it.
I was just
This
saying.
is a topic. Yeah, Ben,
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
please.
thank you. In the New Zealand context, I think a book of interest will. I mean, New Zealand's literary history is very young compared to a lot of other places. and the early writing, the colonial writing, was pretty terrible, to be frank. And then we didn't really have, I suppose, writing that was captured and New Zealand was proud of for a very long time. And then a book that was sort of very well received was The Bone People by Kerry Hume. When it came out, it won the Man Booker back in the late 80s, I think it was. And one of the reasons why I think that was sort of the first text to really resonate with New Zealanders was it because it sort of captured this hybridity between two cultures, and it did it really beautifully. And it wove two distinct versions of Aotearoa experiences together, and it did it really, really well. So that's a rec.
Thank you. Thank you for your recommendations, and thank you for joining us today, audience members and all your wonderful panelists. I really had a very, very nice discussion and learned such a lot of things from your views. Thank you so much for joining us.